Hello, this is Dr. Bob. I'm with Robert L. Anderson Associates. Me and my colleagues are a group of nursing education consultants having expertise in a variety of areas. I'm going to be sharing with you a second in a series on NCLEX success. You might want to check out my previous video, which I have posted on our consulting webpage, as well as on my blog and in LinkedIn. So in case you want to learn more about it, please take advantage of it. Success begins with admission. Now, as you probably aware, there are public university programs and community colleges for the associate degree programs, as well as for-profit schools, such as the larger groups that all have a variety of admission requirements. The public schools tend to have longer waiting lists, and because part of that is the tuition and fees are substantially less. They're typically only admit a couple times a year, so there's a larger queue for people to get into the program. So that means that you have to figure out, how am I going to look at some of the research literature to predict student success? Pre-program GPA has always been a strong predictor, and it continues to be so. The second one that's also strongly linked to student success is the science GPA, and that is in courses such as anatomy and physiology, nutrition, microbiology, and if you require pharmacology prior to admissions to the program, that would also be a strong indicator of success. Now the HESI has an A2, what they call it, assessment score. It's given to the students on when they're applying. The subscale of anatomy and physiology, if the students have taken these courses prior, has a very strong correlation to NCLEX success. The A2 score primarily looks at comprehension in reading and math, and all of these from HESI are supported by the peer-reviewed literature. Another commonly used assessment is the T-score, and that does vary by institution. The literature is less robust and predictive scores, but that would be based on your institutional needs and visiting with the vendor about how they have found it successful or not successful. And I also recommend a one-on-one meeting with students and at least a faculty member, not to make a decision about admissions, because that's kind of fraught with errors because of the subjective nature of that, and basing an admissions decision on interviews is kind of, from my opinion, very opening yourself up for some litigation. But it does provide an opportunity for you to share about the demands of the nursing school, and basically it's an informed consent of what is it going to be required once they get in. In fact, I have even used a summary statement that the students sign so that they are fully aware about work demands, study times, all those issues, so that they enter into the program fully aware of what is necessary. And sometimes students decide maybe this is not the time to enter into a nursing program. Obviously, financial resources are very important, and working with the financial aid officer is extremely useful, so that the students can maximize financial resources. The research is really clear. Individuals who work over 12 hours a week really place them at high risk for failure. It's even more compounded if the student is academically challenged. So they're spending all this money and maybe not going to be successful. So perhaps the advice might be to wait a while or work on some additional financial support before they enter into the nursing program. Now, there are a variety of scholarship loans and even employer options to assist with funding for school. So encourage students to take advantage of that. Oftentimes overlooked are things such as the military, which has most of the military services, which have student assistant programs, which you agree to go to school, and they will then pay for your tuition, give you a small stipend, and then you serve your country after finishing. There's others that provide similar kinds of things that can be very useful to students, and if they're adverse to taking on debt, these are good ways of doing it because they provide forgiveness of loans or pay it up front. Now, family and others need to be aware of the issues that are, students going to face in nursing school. Often the student is the homemaker or the head of the home, and needs to take on a lot of these kind of activities with the children and so forth. So it needs to be a very clear discussion with all of the responsible parties engaged with the student about school may interfere with the home activities, such as taking the kids to sports, band, family celebration, and so forth. Having gone through this as a nurse, you understand, nursing student, you understand that school can be very demanding and is easy to be seduced by these other non-academic things, and that can certainly interfere with your success. The orientation is the next phase of student success, and it needs to be mandatory. And I would offer several sessions so you can be ensured that you get people during the day and even at perhaps an evening one, and don't get so hung up on saying it's only at this time. But that's your decision. But at least you're beginning to offer the student time to become very familiar with the program. I would include at the latter part of the of the orientation a financial aid discussion and planning. I would invite the family and significant others to this portion, and you might consider serving a meal, maybe pizza or snacks or something. At one institution where I was, we had an inexpensive Mexican restaurant next door. We just had a little buffet. I think it cost us $3 a serving. And so we just included all the family in the latter part of our orientation, so everyone is engaged and interacting and understanding what mom or dad's going to be going through in the case of those with children. Now, in the orientation, a lot of this is probably pretty standard. So, and I'm not trying to insult your intelligence here or what your protocols are, but I'm just going to give just a brief review of some key issues, and that's obviously you need to talk about the nursing program information, mission and philosophy, a vision if you have one, student learning outcomes, what they are and how they're used throughout the program and how they're linked to your various courses and how that has a lot to do with student success and on the NCLEX. What is students' participation in governance? For example, most places have them involved in curriculum. Some may have other committees that they serve on, like evaluation, so that the students have an opportunity to participate in how the school is being managed and run. The catalog, of course, is the heart of this. It forms the legal basis for the agreement, along with your course syllabi and your student handbook. It usually should have the plan of study, the clinical requirements, the progression and graduation, health requirements for admission, drop dates, and course failure policy. Also, I didn't put on here, but I would also put, if you're going to have an end-of-program assessment of some sort in that last course, such as one of the vendor-produced predictor exams, you need to have that needs to be stated in your catalog as well, so that the students are fully clear what is it they have to do when they enter into the program, and it's a full disclosure that there will be additional assessments beyond faculty developed exams at some point in the curriculum before they'll be able to graduate from the program. And that's a whole separate topic, and perhaps I'll have to do a video on that one as well. Student handbook is critical. I've seen faculty don't spend a lot of time on the handbook, or what they do is they duplicate what's already in the catalog. So from my perspective, the catalog should stand alone and the student handbook should stand alone. There should be no duplication between the two. So you need to make sure that you have what is expected in that handbook that's not necessarily, that shouldn't be in the catalog. So these are important things like, the testing and grading procedures, the academic standards in terms of attendance, clinical expectations, the dress code, simulation, all those various issues need to be spelled out in some detail. Student health, communication, dress code, and as I mentioned, academic integrity. Now, all of the handbooks, I should state, go back for a second, the catalog and the student handbook, in my opinion, you should have the students sign a form of acknowledgement that they have received that information, or they have been provided the link on the website as to where they can find it, and date it, and that should be put into their file. Because what you're wanting to do is create a paper trail that demonstrates that you have indeed oriented them to these basic issues. So you don't want to go down the road where someone says, well, I didn't know about this. The other is ensuring that you review the State Board of Nursing requirements, attendance, because as you know, they have to be so many hours. They have to be, usually most states require that they're divided among different clinical areas. And of course, the criminal background checks that the boards are going to do. And all of your agencies, not all, but the majority of your acute care agencies at least, will require a criminal background check on the students before they are allowed to come into the facility. So this is why in most schools, students undergo an initial criminal background check as a part of the admissions requirement. And if there's a problem, then there has to be an adjudication about how that's going to be handled. I know one place where I was working, what we did is that we had one person that kind of reviewed all of these questionable background checks, and then we had a protocol which was then used to help us decide if this is going to be a problem for their eventually obtaining a Board of Nursing approval to set for the NCLEX exam. So it's extremely important. Students also need to know that if they commit a criminal offense through during the curriculum, this can also come back to be a problem for them. And depending on your policy, you may have some randomized testing, particularly for drugs and alcohol, if there's suspicion that these may be issues. Again, that should follow your catalog within the university and their policy in regards to that. But the last thing you want to do is send any student to a clinical site that may be impaired. It's important in the orientation that you spend time on time management and planning. Almost all these students today will have a smartphone with a calendar that they can, and for my suggestion, what they should do is look at the course syllabus, look at the dates when assignments are due, create yourself a master calendar. Maybe that's on a piece of paper, on a grid of some sort, or a calendar just print out, and then you plan how you're going to meet that requirement, when you're going to study for it, when you've got a term paper, when do you need to start working on the term paper, and then there should be cues and reminders in their calendar so that they know when they need to do and how they need to do it in order to get done. I often find students wait to the very last minute to do something, or they forget they have something to do. So creating that master calendar perhaps a week or two in advance, and what I would recommend, try to do it for the whole semester, and then meet one-on-one with her academic advisor to go over it, is a really good way to begin to ensure students will have some success in their time management. There should be a short study session on how to study, and that may be a follow-up orientation component. Also one on how to write term papers, if term papers are a part of your curriculum. And one thing I find students typically don't know how to do is do an outline, so that they just kind of begin writing, and then of course you have a jumbled mess of various thoughts. So I would suggest maybe just a separate group on doing this in a different setting. I would also ensure there is a session on test taking strategies. Again, I would maybe schedule this the second week, an hour or two. A lot of the vendors have excellent tools on test-taking strategies, and of course your faculty will have expertise as well, so that you're trying to give them this orientation, just in time, if you will, before, because if you overwhelm them with all this stuff in the basic orientation, a lot of it they're just not going to remember. So I highly recommend spacing these out over a period of time. strongly consider the Center mentoring program, a big brother, big sister. I found this extremely successful, particularly for students that may be at high risk. They can kind of take them under their wing, literally, to, well, when I took this course, this is what I had to do, this is what I found, and blah, blah, blah. Or they just need someone to talk to as they progress in the curriculum. As you know, nursing school is very stressful. Whoops. So providing a thorough orientation with many follow-up sessions in 1 month is critical to student success. So I suggested to you, particularly on the term paper, reviewing the time management strategies, test-taking strategies. I would have those if I was the dean and faculty. You know, a weekly session, maybe offered a couple times during the week, so the students get that information just in time to help them prepare. It's critical that you establish expectations in the beginning of the program, because you want to really begin creating that foundation for success, because you're really taking someone that just basically walks off the street, and depending on the demographics of your population, they may be fairly young and not have any significant life experiences as it relates to becoming a professional. So it takes time and energy to help them be molded and shaped into that role as a professional nurse. Now, I use a resource, and kind of tooting my own horn here, is a book that I've written. This is in a second edition. It's on Amazon. It's relatively inexpensive. You may want to consider having it available to students. It covers a wide variety of what I've talked about, including financial aid, success strategies and curriculum, and so forth. And I think you'll find that the students will find it a very useful tool to help them understand more fully what's going to be done. You may want to include something like this in your orientation packet. So if you have further information that you liked, or further things you'd like to know about some of my thoughts and my colleagues' thoughts around student success, give us a call. Check out our website. And we're here to help you. We're a very cost-effective service that will provide a lot of support to you. A lot of it can be done virtually if that's what you choose. It really decreases the cost substantially, or we can make on-site visits. So our goal is to ensure your students are successful and to enable your faculty in order to do such. Dr. Bob.